On my father's wedding day, my stepmother mocked my handmade dress in front of 200 guests, saying, "Poor girls shouldn't try to look rich." 5 hours later, I bought the entire wedding venue and cancelled the reception. It's still hard for me to fully process everything that happened. I never thought I'd be that person, the one who seeks revenge, the one who makes a bold, dramatic statement. But after years of dealing with my stepmother's snide comments and passive-aggressive remarks, I snapped. Maybe it was a mix of feeling humiliated, unappreciated, and just plain fed up with my father's blind loyalty to her. Or maybe it was just because, for once, I wanted to be the one who had control over the situation. Anyway, here's how it went down. I don't know how many times I tried to explain to myself that I should just let it go. After all, it wasn't about me, it was about my father, Roland, and his happiness. And yes, I know that family dynamics are complicated, but Kate, my stepmother, has always had a way of making me feel small. At first, I tried to be civil. I kept my distance, I smiled at her when I had to, and I avoided confrontations. But deep down, I felt like she was trying to erase any part of my life that didn't fit into her perfect, polished image. I'd seen this dynamic before, on TV, in movies. The evil stepmother who makes the stepchild feel like they don't belong. But in real life, it's more subtle. Kate never outright said she didn't like me, but she didn't have to. Her actions spoke volumes. And things only got worse when I found out that she and my father were getting married. I never liked the idea of it. To me, it felt like my mother's memory was being replaced, like Kate was stepping in to fill a role my mom never could. But Roland was in love. He didn't see it the same way. In fact, he didn't even seem to notice the little comments Kate made about me, comments about my clothes, my interests, or how I didn't know how to act in certain social situations. When Roland and Kate started talking about their wedding, I was put in a position I didn't want to be in. They wanted me to attend, obviously, but they also wanted me to play a role. I was to be the dutiful daughter, wearing a dress that conformed to their vision. But that was never going to happen. So I made my own dress. I've always loved sewing, and I thought, if I'm going to go to this wedding, I might as well feel good about myself in something that's mine. It was a simple dress, light blue with lace accents and a flattering A-line cut. I spent weeks on it, getting every stitch just right. It wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful, and most importantly, it was made by me. The day of the wedding, I felt nervous but proud. I knew Kate had spent months planning every detail of the event. Her dress was a massive white satin gown with sequins and pearls, and the whole venue was being decked out in shades of pale pink and white. It was everything she wanted, elegant, shiny, perfect. But I knew, deep down, that no matter how hard I tried, my dress would never be good enough for her. The ceremony went smoothly, but even then, there was a subtle tension in the air whenever Kate looked at me. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel the weight of her gaze on me. It was as if she was constantly judging me, sizing me up. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my father instead, who was absolutely glowing with happiness. It was hard not to smile at him. For all the difficulties between us, I could tell this marriage meant the world to him. And then, it happened. The reception was in full swing when Kate stood up to make a toast. I don't remember much of what she said, other than the fact that it was long and rehearsed, full of gushing compliments to my father. But it wasn't until the moment she turned to me that I felt my stomach twist in knots. "I'd like to thank my beautiful stepdaughter for coming tonight," Kate said, her voice dripping with sweetness, but her eyes narrowed as she glanced at my dress. "And for trying so hard to fit in. But let's be honest, poor girls shouldn't try to look rich. It's just not something they can pull off." There was a sharp intake of breath from the crowd, and I could feel every single set of eyes on me. A mixture of awkwardness and silence filled the room. Kate's comment wasn't loud, but it was pointed, and it cut through the chatter like a knife. I tried to smile. I really did. But it was a smile that felt like it was being held together by sheer willpower. I could feel my cheeks burning, my hands shaking. How could she say that? How could she humiliate me in front of all these people? What had I ever done to her that was so wrong? I was a grown woman, an adult who had worked hard to make her own way in the world. And yet, here I was, being treated like an embarrassment by the very person who was now going to be my mother. I could feel my father's eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at him. He was there, smiling, laughing along with Kate, completely unaware of the knife she had just stabbed into my heart. I excused myself from the table and retreated to a corner of the venue. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. What had just happened? Was it just a joke? A poor attempt at humor? I didn't know, but it didn't matter. I was done. It wasn't long before I had my phone in my hand. I found the number for the venue manager. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something bold. Something that would show Kate and everyone else there that I wasn't going to let her treat me like this anymore. When the manager picked up, I took a deep breath. "Hi, I'd like to inquire about buying out the venue for the evening. How much would that cost?" The manager was caught off guard. Well. It's not common to do that, but I can check for you. It's going to be quite expensive. Name your price, I said. There was a long pause, followed by a number that seemed almost absurd. But I didn't hesitate. I told him to charge it to my card, and within an hour, I had secured the entire venue. When I walked back into the reception hall later that evening, I could see the looks of confusion on people's faces. Roland was standing near the front, talking to guests, and Kate was chatting with some of her friends. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me. And then, just as the next round of drinks was being served, I made the announcement, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I have some news. The wedding reception is over. I've just bought out the entire venue, and the reception is now officially cancelled." It was like an explosive had dropped in the room. The shock on everyone's faces was enough to make me feel like I had done something monumental. Kate's face turned white. Her smile faltered, and she walked up to me, seething. "What the heck did you do?" she hissed. I didn't respond. I simply walked past her and left the venue, feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't stick around to witness the fallout. I wasn't there when Kate went ballistic, or when my father tried to salvage the evening, or when the guests started to ask questions. I had done what I needed to do, and now I just needed to get some space. I went home that night, threw myself onto the couch, and stared at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. At first, there was a sense of empowerment. I had made a statement. I had reclaimed control in a situation where I had felt powerless for so long. But as the night wore on, that initial rush began to fade, and doubt started creeping in. Had I gone too far? Was this going to be the thing that irreparably fractured my relationship with my father? The next morning, I woke up to a flood of text messages and missed calls. All of them were from my father. There was no mention of the wedding itself, just a long string of messages begging me to come over and talk. "Please, Penelope, we need to talk about what happened," one of them read. This is not how things should have gone. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready to face him yet. And honestly, I wasn't sure how I felt about him anymore. I had been so desperate for his approval, for him to see me as more than just the awkward daughter who never quite fit into his new life. But after everything that happened, it seemed like he wasn't really seeing me at all. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to keep myself busy with work and other distractions, but it was impossible to avoid the reality of what I had done. I had made a decision in the heat of the moment, and now it was too late to take it back. Then, on the third day after the wedding, I finally called my father back. My hands trembled as I dialed his number. When he answered, his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Penelope," he said, his tone soft but strained, "I don't understand why you did what you did. Why did you cancel the reception?" I exhaled slowly, trying to gather my thoughts. "Dad, she humiliated me. She humiliated me in front of all of you, all of her guests. She made me feel small, like I wasn't even worth her respect." I heard him sigh on the other end of the line. "I know Kate can be difficult at times, but she didn't mean it that way. You know how she is, she tries to make everything perfect, and sometimes, she just says things without thinking. Without thinking? I repeated, incredulous. She called me a poor girl trying to look rich in front of 200 people, Dad. How is that not intentional? How is that not mean-spirited? There was a long pause. I could almost feel him trying to think of something to say, but the words weren't coming. Finally, he spoke again, quieter now. I don't know what to say, Penelope. But I need you to understand something, I love Kate. She's part of my life now, and I don't want to lose you over this. I blinked back tears. I'm not asking you to choose, Dad. But you need to see that I can't just sit back and let her treat me like that. I've been putting up with her for years. You've been putting up with her for years. But that doesn't make it okay. I could hear him swallowing hard, and it was clear that this conversation was difficult for him. I don't know what you want from me, Penelope. I don't know what to do about Kate and me, but you're my daughter, and I don't want to lose you. I wanted to yell, to tell him that I had been trying so hard to hold on to a relationship that was slipping through my fingers. I wanted him to acknowledge that I had been hurt, that I had felt abandoned. But all I could manage was a shaky sigh. I just need space, Dad, I whispered. I don't know what else to say right now. Okay, he said softly. I understand. I'll give you space. But I hope we can figure this out soon. I hung up, feeling drained. For all the pain I was in, for all the frustration that had built up inside me over the years, I still cared about him. But at the same time, I felt like I was losing him to Kate. And the worst part? I didn't know if I could get him back. Days passed, and I stayed away from the wedding aftermath. Kate had tried to reach out a few times, texting me apologies, offering to talk. But I wasn't interested. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses or her version of what happened. I knew her too well to believe that it would be anything but manipulative. It wasn't until a week later that I got another call from my father. This time, his voice was more urgent. Penelope, we need to talk. I'm serious. Can you come over? Against my better judgment, I agreed. I couldn't avoid him forever, and part of me knew I had to face him sooner or later. I drove over to his house, my stomach a tangled mess of nerves. What was he going to say? Would he finally understand? When I arrived, he was waiting for me in the living room, sitting on the couch, his hands clasped together. Kate wasn't there. I didn't know if that was a relief or if it made everything worse. Penelope, he started, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I've come to a decision. I frowned, my heart racing. A decision? Yes, he said, his voice steady but not without tension. I want you to come to a family meeting with Kate and me. We need to talk about all of this, really talk. And I want us to find a way forward, together. I don't want to lose you. Not over her. The words hung in the air. I couldn't tell if this was his attempt at reconciliation or if he was just trying to appease me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this conversation could lead to something better. Maybe we could find a way to fix the damage that had been done. I nodded slowly, trying to control the emotions bubbling up inside me. I'll come. But if we're going to do this, it has to be real. I won't just sit there and pretend that everything is fine. I promise, he said. I just want us to be a family again. As I left his house that evening, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something new, or if it was just another attempt to sweep the truth under the rug. The next few days were a blur of tension and anticipation. I couldn't stop thinking about the upcoming meeting. I'd agreed to it, but I wasn't sure what to expect. Roland's words kept echoing in my head, I want us to be a family again. I wasn't sure if that was even possible anymore, but I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. When the day of the meeting finally arrived, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I had no idea how this conversation would go. I was still so angry at Kate for how she treated me, angry at myself for letting it go on for so long, and angry at my father for not seeing what was right in front of him. I spent the morning pacing around my apartment, going over what I wanted to say, rehearsing my words. But every time I tried to form a sentence in my head, it felt inadequate. I arrived at Roland's house early, trying to collect myself before everything went down. The house felt emptier than I remembered. I stood in the living room for a while, staring out the window, trying to calm my nerves. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke my reverie. Kate had arrived. The doorbell rang, and I took a deep breath. I walked to the door and opened it, steeling myself for whatever was coming next. "Penelope," Kate said, her voice tight. She was wearing one of her signature designer outfits, looking immaculate as always. It made my blood boil, just a little bit. She always looked perfect. But she wasn't perfect. Not to me, not anymore. "Kate," I replied curtly, stepping aside to let her in. Roland was already sitting at the dining table when I entered the room. He gave me a nervous smile, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I wasn't sure if he was worried about the conversation we were about to have or worried about the state of his marriage. Maybe both. Kate sat down across from me, her posture stiff. She didn't speak right away, and I could tell she was weighing her words carefully. This wasn't going to be a simple discussion. There was too much resentment built up on both sides for it to be anything less than a full confrontation. Roland cleared his throat, attempting to break the tension. "I'm glad you both could make it," he said, his voice tentative. "I know things have been difficult between us, and I don't want to ignore it anymore. We need to talk, really talk, and figure out where we go from here." I nodded but said nothing. My gaze shifted to Kate. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were focused on her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. It was a familiar, almost rehearsed gesture. She was preparing to play the victim. I could already tell. Roland went on. "I don't want to lose my daughter over this. Penelope, you're so important to me. I've tried to make this work with Kate, but I see now that I've let things get out of hand. I've let you both fall into a pattern of resentment, and that's not healthy for anyone." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure how to. For so long, I had wanted him to say those words. I had wanted him to acknowledge the pain I'd been feeling. But now that he had, it didn't feel like enough. "Not yet." Kate finally spoke, her voice sharp, but quieter than I expected. "I don't understand why everything has to be so difficult. I've tried, Roland. I've tried to make her feel welcome in our lives, but she keeps pushing me away. I don't know what else I can do." I felt my chest tighten. Her words were almost too perfect. It was exactly what I had been expecting. She always made it seem like everything was my fault. She always made me feel like I was the problem. But I wasn't the one who had mocked her in front of hundreds of people, was I? "You've tried?" I finally spoke, my voice steady, but laced with an undercurrent of anger. "You've tried to make me feel welcome? By calling me a poor girl trying to look rich in front of everyone? That's your idea of trying?" Kate's face flushed, her lips tightening into a thin line. "I didn't mean it that way," she replied, though it sounded more like an excuse than an apology. "You're just so different from me, Penelope. I don't know how to connect with you. I've never known how to relate to someone who doesn't want to be a part of my world." "Your world?" I repeated, the disbelief creeping into my voice. "You mean your perfect, flawless world where everyone has to fit your standards? Where everything has to be pristine and perfectly curated?" Well, newsflash, Kate, I'm not that person, and I never will be. And frankly, I'm tired of trying to pretend that I am. I could see Roland wincing at the harshness in my words, but I couldn't stop. It had all been building up for so long. The years of subtle insults, the passive-aggressive comments, and the sense that, no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the outsider in this new family. Kate's expression faltered for a moment, and I could see a flicker of something, maybe regret, maybe guilt. But it quickly vanished, replaced by the familiar coolness. I never asked you to be a part of my world, she snapped, her voice now defensive. I just wanted to make things work. I never wanted to hurt you. But you're right, we're never going to get along. I don't know what you expect me to do about that. I could feel my anger building again, but I didn't want to escalate things further. I had already made my point. I had already shown that I wasn't willing to let her walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to let her pretend like she was blameless in all this. Roland sat back in his chair, looking defeated. I think we're getting nowhere, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I wanted this to be a conversation, not a battle. But it feels like we're all just stuck in the same patterns. I nodded, feeling the exhaustion of this conversation sink in. I had wanted to make things right. I had wanted to fix everything, to feel like we could move forward as a family. But now, I wasn't sure that was possible anymore. I think it's time for us to take a step back, I said quietly. I need some space to think about what I want out of this, whatever this is. I need to figure out if I can keep trying to make it work with Kate, or if I'm just going to keep getting hurt in the process. Roland didn't say anything. He just nodded, looking like he had aged a year in the last 5 minutes. Kate remained silent, staring at the floor. Okay, Roland said finally. We'll give you the space you need, Penelope. But I want you to know that I love you. And I'll always be here for you, no matter what. I didn't say anything more. I stood up, walked out of the room, and left their house without looking back. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words, unresolved feelings, and a sense of finality that I wasn't ready to fully face. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let Kate or anyone else push me around again. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that wedding a week ago. And no matter what happened next, I would never go back to being that person again. As I left Roland's house that day, I felt like I was walking away from more than just a conversation. It felt like I was walking away from an entire chapter of my life that had been filled with empty promises, unspoken resentment, and the kind of passive cruelty that had shaped my relationship with Kate and my father. I had been a part of their world, but I had never truly belonged in it. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something that had been missing for years: freedom. Over the next few days, I distanced myself from both Roland and Kate. I didn't want to engage in their drama anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that I could just accept Kate for who she was, especially after everything she had put me through. But I also knew I wasn't going to give up on my father completely. He had his faults, but he was still my father. And I loved him. I kept my distance, but I also kept the door open. I knew he would eventually try to reach out again. And when he did, I would be ready to have a real conversation. But I wasn't going to let it be on Kate's terms, or on the terms of anyone who couldn't see me for who I truly was. One afternoon, I got a call from a business acquaintance, someone I had met years ago when I was working on a side project with a local development group. She was a woman I respected and admired, someone who had worked her way up from nothing to become an influential figure in the business world. Her name was Evelyn, and she had a reputation for knowing exactly when and where to invest. Penelope, she said when I answered the phone, I heard about what happened at your father's wedding. And I want to offer you an opportunity. I have a real estate deal that I think you might be interested in. I wasn't sure what she meant at first, but as she explained, everything clicked into place. Evelyn was working on a new luxury hotel project in the area. It was a big investment, and she was looking for investors to buy up the venue spaces that would later be used for high-end events. The place was stunning, a massive historical property with potential for weddings, conferences, and more. Evelyn wasn't offering me just a small share. She was offering me an opportunity to buy a significant stake in the project. It would cost a fortune, but it was a risk worth taking. I had saved up money over the years, invested in a few ventures, and I knew I had enough capital to make this work. I didn't hesitate. I agreed immediately, and within a matter of weeks, I was officially an investor in the luxury hotel. But there was something else I had in mind, a plan. I didn't just want to be part of this investment. I wanted to take back control of something that had been stolen from me. And I wanted Kate to understand exactly who she was messing with. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. I was at my office one day when I got a message from Roland. He asked if we could meet. He didn't mention Kate, but I could tell it was coming. He needed me to come to his house and have another conversation. I agreed, but I had a little surprise of my own in mind. When I arrived at Roland's house, he was sitting at the dining table again, looking nervous. This time, there was no Kate. I couldn't help but feel a bit of relief. "Penelope," he said, his voice cautious. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our last conversation. I don't want to lose you. I've spoken to Kate, and she's agreed that we need to make some changes. We want to make things right. I know I've let you down. But you're still my daughter, and I don't want you to feel like you're being pushed out of our lives." I nodded, listening carefully. I could tell that he was genuine, but I wasn't going to let my guard down completely. "Not yet." "I appreciate that, Dad," I said. "But it's not just about the things that happened at the wedding. It's about the years of tension, the little things, the constant sense that I'm not really part of the family. And it's about Kate, how she treats me and how you let it happen. You're so caught up in her world that you can't even see what it's doing to me." Roland looked down, guilt written all over his face. "I see that now. I've been so blinded by her, by this image of what our family should be, that I didn't realize I was pushing you away. I'm sorry, Penelope." I took a deep breath. "I know you're sorry, but it's going to take time. I need time and I need space. I don't know if I can ever fully trust Kate, but I'm willing to try. But first, I need to show you something." He looked at me, confused, but I didn't explain. I wasn't ready to dive into the details just yet. I stood up and walked to the door. "Follow me." When we arrived at the luxury hotel that I had invested in, Roland's eyes widened in surprise. He had no idea that I had bought into the project, let alone become a major shareholder. I led him through the grand ballroom, past the high ceilings and crystal chandeliers, through the polished marble floors. It was a sight to behold. "This is beautiful," Roland said, clearly impressed. "But why are we here?" I smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction build in me. "It's beautiful, isn't it? It's a luxury venue, and I've invested in it. I've been given a significant stake in the property. But I wanted to show you something. This is the venue where Kate's next big event is going to be held." Roland looked at me, puzzled. "Kate's event? Remember that wedding reception she had planned?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with purpose. "Well, I've decided to buy the venue space for the entire evening." Roland's face paled as the realization sank in. "You didn't?" "Oh, I did," I said, feeling a mix of pride and quiet satisfaction. "I bought the entire venue, Roland. And I canceled the reception. I made sure that the night would go down in history as the most expensive, least attended wedding in the history of our town." I watched as his eyes flickered with shock, then moved to a mix of disbelief and understanding. He didn't say anything for a moment, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He had always underestimated me. But I had just made sure he'd never make that mistake again. This is a lot, Penelope," he finally said, his voice low. "I don't care about the money, Dad," I replied, my tone cool. "I care about respect. About my own dignity. About being able to stand up for myself without apologizing. Kate humiliated me in front of everyone. So I made sure she would never forget who she was messing with." We stood in silence for a moment. Roland was still processing everything, but I could tell he understood. "Penelope, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," I replied, turning to leave. "Just know that I'm done letting her walk all over me. And I'm done letting anyone else do it, too. This is my life now. And I'm taking control of it." As I walked out of the venue, I could feel the weight of everything I had done, the years of frustration, the broken relationships, the quiet sacrifices, lift from my shoulders. I had finally stood up for myself. I had taken my power back. And it felt damn good.